broom. That's a good look. If I ever did that, that's the look I would go for.
The other guy is a guy who takes no prisoners when it comes to sports.
Let's stomp these dudes.
Together, they bring you the best in Oklahoma State sports talk and opinions on sports from around the country.
That's right. Listen up. Hey, listen up. You.
It's Jason Elmquist.
Today, I'm a mild-mannered reporter for the newspaper.
And Patrick Wheeler.
I'm a very dangerous man.
This is the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
That's what I'm talking about. Sport.
You ain't never heard nothing like this. Let me work, show me where the mic is. I'm on stage, black shirt and my Timbs. You know how I do it, I ain't playing with you, I've been grinding. Anybody trying to sleep on me, better do something with your eyelids. I hear a lot of whining, but I don't hear a lot of rhyming. Everybody got opinions, let it go into my ear, then I block that. Put me on stage, I'm a rock that, saying you the best. Stop that, phony, I am not that. What are y'all doing out here? What are y'all doing out here? Maybe you should spend a little less time with the women on your arms and a little bit more with your career.
What up? It's the Afternoon Sports Drive.
But I should be in the top 10. Give me a list of names. I'm a top them. I'm just playing with you.
Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler with you. Jason Elmquist will be in here later on in the second hour, I believe. We'll get to him. Quick announcement for anybody around the Stillwater area that had plans to visit OSU. You will have to keep that on hold for now. So Oklahoma State just announcing that they will remain closed to visitors until July 7th. So plan accordingly. Of course, Oklahoma State announcing as well, it's been, a few weeks now since they said intending on having students back on campus. They've joined a number of schools in doing that. Definitely something you want to hear there, but right now, just for extra precautions, no visitors until July 7th. This is as Stillwater, too, as a town is opening up. A lot more businesses being allowed to reopen. Of course, precautions are still being taken, but I will say that Stillwater and Oklahoma in particular are moving forward with this. I think a lot of places are. A lot of states are doing that. Around the Midwest, I like to think of the Midwest as more, Missouri, Oklahoma, Arkansas, kind of that area is more central than anything. But all these states surrounding we're moving on. We're moving forward. I like it. I was back in Missouri over the weekend, and it didn't take long for me to notice that there has been a shift in moods. People are starting to get back to normal in a sense, and I'm all for it because it is definitely time. And hopefully everything keeps moving in a positive direction as it is doing in the United States as a whole. Positive percentage numbers are down. And that's the message I got to relay about the coronavirus to everybody. Because all of a sudden the news story is, but cases are still rising. We've got more testing. We've got more testing, people. There's going to be a lot more positive coronavirus tests. Now that tests are available. There's going to be a lot more positive cases. Of course there are. But overall, the percentages are trending down. And we're moving forward. And sports will follow. That's what we're going to get to. Major League Baseball talked about it yesterday. Trey Cobb hopped on the show too. We really appreciated him joining. He gave his insight. And I'll actually play a little bit of what he said yesterday because it ended up being something that I completely agreed with. We all know that the proposal was sent from the owners to the players today. Haven't heard any news on negotiations, how that's going yet. Might get some news during the show. We'll see. But this is what Trey Cobb had to say. This is a little snippet of his talk with us yesterday on what he hopes the MLBPA eventually will do. Take a listen. Are players going to approve this idea of revenue sharing going 50-50?
I'm not sure. I hope that, they do, because if they don't, I think it's going to be a strike situation where it's a holdout and it would be really messy, I think a lot of it's going to come down to what is going to be the quarantine situation with the season and the spring training. And because the early talks were, hey, you're going to be away from your families. And I know the players that's going to be tough for them to swallow. So I think it's gonna come down to, how much are the players gonna actually get? How much does playing the game mean to those guys? Because eventually you have to stand your ground. As much as you love doing your job, you have to at some point say, okay, well, this is just not enough. I think it's gonna come down to how bad do they want to play, and what's the plan with the families. Because if they can get a solid plan in place with the families, I think that the players will agree to pretty much anything on that point.
That end part that Trey talked about there is kind of the issue that I've brought up before. Because immediately when the announcement was made that, hey, we might, as Major League Baseball, we might try to hop into Arizona and Florida and create this bubble, and everyone's going to remain quarantined, but it might allow us to get somewhat of a season in. And immediately there were responses from prominent baseball names, most namely Mike Trout, Clayton Kershaw. A lot of these guys saying, hey, that just doesn't work for us. And what's the reasoning that they throw out? Well, because we'd be away from our families. And that's what Trey was talking about right there too. But he also threw in, it's going to come down to how much do these guys really want to play the game? And I think we're going to see it with this proposal as well. Because this proposal is asking for a 50-50 split. That's something that has never happened before in Major League Baseball. There are no caps on salaries in Major League Baseball. Only major sport that takes place. And they want to keep it that way. But these are unprecedented times. You're talking about a 40% hit from fans not walking through those gates. That's huge. 40%. So do the players not, in a way, owe it to us as fans to come back? I think there's an argument to be made that they do. Right? Because when you look at everything that fans give, we ultimately pay these guys paychecks. We pay professional athletes to perform and entertain us. Bottom line. We pay money when we walk through the gates, when we buy beers and hot dogs and what have you. We pay money by being the viewers on national television and keeping stations afloat that air the games. Do the players not in some way owe it to the fans to come back this season and to reach a deal, even if it means that these millionaires have to take a hit for one season financially? In the long run, is it really going to affect them? I mean, really. It's not. These players need to take that into account, and I don't think that a lot of them are. And I said it yesterday, and Trey kind of echoed it a little bit too in what he said. You're going to find out what all these players are about. How bad do they really want to come back and play baseball? Are they content right now with being nearly 2 months removed from the start of the season and whatever they're doing? Probably limited training in some ways. Are they content being locked up in a way, wherever they may be, with their family or whoever they've been quarantined with? After this amount of time, I can't buy that. I don't buy that. And I absolutely do not buy that we can go into a situation where we'd be away from our family for 4 months. Now listen, I'm not being insensitive by saying that. Is the situation different for everybody? Sometimes, absolutely. Some of these guys might have families that they're needing to be maybe even in the present time with them, in the same place with them to help out. But they've done it before. Major League Baseball players do not get to be the dads that they probably want to be sometimes, right? The husbands that they probably want to be. They're on the road a lot. So I don't buy this whole, we can't be away from our families for 4 months. If your families continue to remain quarantined or continue to follow the guidelines and the restrictions that are in place for their health and safety, Well, why can't you go do your job? I mean, why? Why can't you? Because it ultimately comes down to exactly what Trey said. How bad do these guys want to play? Because look, if all of them came out and said, you know what? I don't want to play Major League Baseball right now because I want to stay with my family. And if that was the consensus amongst the majority, then fine. I'd say, okay, if that's the way it's going to be, then fine. But I never would buy that because players want to play. Athletes want to get back on the field and on the court. I have no reason to believe, especially when you throw in that Major League Baseball, the regular season, didn't even get to start. It'd be one thing if it were deep into the season like the NBA and you had teams that were not going to make the postseason and knew it. Then you might see some players say, well, really, why would I come back at this point? What's the point? And I understand that, especially some of these NBA players. I get it. But Major League Baseball, a brand new year, brand new season, didn't even get started. So nobody out there can convince me that these players don't want to be playing baseball right now with their teammates. I brought it up yesterday and said, you know what? Honestly, think about it from your own perspective here too. Don't just think about it from a Major League Baseball player's perspective. Think about it from your own personal perspective. How many of you guys out there have been quarantined this whole time with your family? Whether it's with your kids, whether it's with your significant other, whatever. How many of you that have been in that situation could actually 100% honestly tell me that you're not going a little crazy with the situation? Human beings are not designed to sit around in a finite area with other human beings for a long period of time. They're just not. Prisons aren't a natural way for human beings to live in. That right there proves it exactly. Human beings are meant to move around, explore, interact in organic situations, not go through the same thing with the same people every single day. That's not what they're meant for. So if you personally are going through that, and a little bit of you is going just a little bit insane here, I have to think the same thing counts for Major League Baseball players. These guys are ready to go. I don't buy Mike Trout saying, we can't do that because I would be away from my family. You're away from your family every season. You may see them a little bit more in any other situation, but is 4 months going to really cause such an issue amongst your family that you can't go play? I don't think so. I don't buy it. Now, would being sequestered in a bubble for 4 months and only being able to go from an MLB stadium to the hotel, and that's it, and I mean that's it. Now, would that suck? Absolutely. Would it take a lot of adjusting? Absolutely. Could it be done? Absolutely. That's the best part about all of this. And players have to be thrilled here. Is if this proposal passes, you're talking about hopefully playing games at home stadiums. You could, for the most part, scrap that idea of the bubble in 2 cities, and you could still play in home stadiums. Wouldn't be fans, but that's one big step from where it looked like it was going to be. Doesn't everybody remember when that announcement came out about the bubble cities, and that looked like that was going to be it, right? Everyone was talking about, yeah, that looks like it's going to be the plan. Then it gets leaked out. Well, actually the plan now all of a sudden, because you know why we're moving forward with this, and data reflects that we can actually start playing right now. Data reflects that young, healthy Major League Baseball players are at very low risk with the coronavirus pandemic, i.e. Scott Boras. We played his interview not too long ago when he said the exact same thing. And he even talked to, what did he say, 100 players? Said little risk is involved and they know it and they're ready to get back. With all that being the case, now it all relies on Major League Baseball players saying, you know what, if it means taking a hit to my pocketbook for one season, fine. And if the whole family issue is going to be the cop out here, it's an 82-game season. It's not even 162 games, it's 82 games. And the playoffs if you make it. So, it's even less time away from your family. I think it's a bad excuse. I think there are a lot of excuses that can be thrown out there for why this can't work. And I capitalize excuses. Because that's what it is. And MLB owners have put themselves in a fantastic position right here. Because if the players say, we're not going to lose money over this, then doesn't that just make the players look awful? Everybody thinks immediately, wow, look how greedy these players are. These ultra-rich players, most of them, mind you, won't give up some of this money to start the season. And the owners are sitting back in the shadows with their arms crossed saying, yep, that's what we're trying to show you. And now we've done it. That's what's going to come from this. Are we going to have this back and forth? So much so that it takes us up to that middle of June where spring training 2 is hopefully going to start? Good Lord, I hope not. I hope that everybody can come to grounds with, you know what, we don't want to have to end up scrapping this season because there's no reason to. Especially now with everything that's being thrown out there, all the ways that it can be done. And I've said this before, sports can be going on right now. They could. We've talked about the ideas of being sequestered, being bubbled up, and finishing out seasons and playing seasons in sports, and it can be done. Testing is now available. That's been a lot of the issues. People talking about, well, we have to make sure there's plenty of testing. We are really on that track right now, and we are getting there. Why do you think NBA practice facilities are opening up? Testing's available. And that's going to be a huge key in all of this. Said it from the get-go. Can Major League Baseball players be tested without taking tests away from the public and hospitals? And the answer is yes. And here's what you do. Because people always ask, well, what happens if someone does test positive? You do exactly what the UFC did over the weekend. You pull that guy out, you quarantine him for 14 days, and you go on with the season. You don't have to shut everything down. Now, we all know why it happened the first time, right, with Rudy Gobert. Nobody knew what this was. So yeah, you take precautions at this point. With what we've learned and the data we've gathered, even if someone were to test positive in Major League Baseball, you take that person, you take them out of the league, everybody gets tested the next day, those that are good to go are out there on the field. And it'll be the same way with football. It'll be the same way with basketball if it returns, which it's looking very unlikely. But Major League Baseball's got to get back. And the proposal, too, the idea of extra playoff teams, talking about 14 playoff teams now, that alone, I think, would want to drive players to get back. Think about some of the teams that wouldn't have had a shot any other year to make the playoffs. Well, 4 more spots open up, and all of a sudden, those players on those teams have to be thinking, you know what? Shortened season. We can do about as good as we usually do. I'm talking about those teams that are average, okay? We can do what we usually do, and we might just find ourselves in the playoffs. If I was a player, that would make me want to get back tomorrow. If that meant moving closer to the ultimate goal, then yeah, I'm ready to go. And they say, well, okay, but you got to take a pay cut. Fine. Fine. If that means me getting back with my team and reaching our goal, or at least giving us a shot at reaching our goal, then fine. I'm not really sure how much of that mindset is around Major League Baseball right now. I really don't know. Is everybody on the same level on the mindset with Mike Trout and Clayton Kershaw? Because if so, we might as well just not have a season, if that's going to be the case. Because I'll tell you what, there's going to be time away from the family here, okay, people? That's just how it is. So if that's going to be the case and everyone doesn't want to play this season because of those reasons, well, might as well not have it. But I have to believe, as many people do too, that's not the mindset around the league. Athletes want to play their sport. They want to get back, especially now when they should have been 2 months into it. Bottom line. We're going to see Major League Baseball. A deal's going to be reached here. And I'm still encouraged by the idea of starting around July 4th. That makes sense. Independence Day baseball to open up the summer. How about that? Think about how great that could be if everything's falling into place with the coronavirus too. If the numbers continue to decrease and all of a sudden maybe a majority of the country is just kicking this thing in the butt and we keep on moving forward, places and states start opening up, and then on top of all of it, Major League Baseball opens up around July 4th. Talk about a good old-fashioned American time. Sign me up. I'm there. When we come back, Urban Meyers had something to say about football. We have these big names talking about college football and their opinions. We've heard some say yes, some say no about whether college football is going to happen. Talk about what Urban Meyers had to say, and I'll tell you if he's right or not. That's next.
Feel like I'm gonna puke, cause my taxes are due. Do my password begin with a 1 or a 2? Been a hell of a ride, but I'm thinking it's time to grow.
Metronome.
Man, I'm up to something. Woody-la-dee-do, thank you all for coming. I hope you like the show, cause it's on a budget. So woody-la-dee-do, yeah, come on, here we go, yeah, come on.
Here we go.
So put your best face on, everybody.
The Afternoon Sports Drive.
You know this song, everybody come hang. Let's go out with the bang.
Here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler with you.
Too young to lie here forever, I'm way too old to
I don't know about you guys, but
ever come hang.
when Urban Meyer talks college football, I tend to listen. You always think of sports and what names come to mind from a coaching standpoint or from an analyst standpoint. Urban Meyer is something that I'll sit down and listen to. Feel like he knows quite a bit about college football. This is his quote regarding college football coming back. He said, quote, "I've had many conversations. There will be football. There are certain areas of the country that have not been highly impacted by the coronavirus. They will play football. I've talked to enough people that they're adamant and this will happen. What that's going to look like to be determined, but there will be football this fall," end quote. Yeah. That's exactly right. And again, he mentioned some of the regional aspect there. This part of the quote, here we go. There are certain areas of the country that have not been highly impacted by the coronavirus. They will play football. Hello, SEC. Hello, Big 12. The SEC is going to have football. Said that over and over again. Big 12, I see no reason why they wouldn't be right behind them. Or right with them, however you want to take it. Pac-12 and the Big 10 remain to be seen. It was interesting to hear Jim Wilson today on Robert's show. Jim, the color analyst for Oregon State, talking about, well, you know what? The mindset still is for Oregon State to be ready to come into Stillwater first week of the season. And I'm not saying that that's impossible, but I will say right now, for that distance and that regional aspect of it, I don't see that happening. I see it much more likely that it's an all-conference schedule around the NCAA or regional games being played non-conference. Because if it comes down to it, let's be honest. How many people really care about non-conference football games? I mean, really. People want to see interconference football games to begin with. The NCAA, if it came down to it and they were forced to cut non-conference games, in a sense would be like, you know what, at least we can still have interconference games, especially in the Power Fives. People care about interconference Big 12 and interconference SEC games. So I get that. And you also get Herm Edwards, now the head coach at Arizona State, saying he believes his team would need 6 weeks to prepare for the 2020 season. That seems to kind of be the consensus. I know 4 weeks was thrown out there, and maybe that was a little short for what was maybe wanted by most coaches. 8 weeks was thrown out there too as I think the ultimate goal. But you meet there in the middle, and if you can get your team 6 weeks to prepare, I think it's doable. Because football, yeah, you need to prepare, obviously, just like you would any other sport. But I think it would take less time to get back in the rhythm than, say, baseball. Football can be prepared for in 6 weeks. Talk about a crash course, but it can be done. They want their players to get the chance to work out and be ready and be in football shape. I don't know how much of football shape you can truly stay in a situation like this, where you're not getting to lift all that much, and you're not taking hits from dummies all that much, and you're not catching balls off the jugs machine all that much. I don't know. But you do have to take it, what Urban Meyer said, with a lot of other voices that have been out there and repeated the same thing, basically. You know what? We're going to have it. College football won't be defeated. And I think that's something that is almost as clear as anything right now. Even if it starts late. Could you imagine the SEC going without a football season? No, I can't either. And I don't think ADs, I don't think presidents, I don't think coaches are all for imagining that either. And they can talk about all they want about having contingency plans and what if this and what if that. They're going to have football. Bottom line. Can't wait. I've got an interesting idea here. An interesting topic that I want to talk about. Shifting gears a little bit from college football. We'll get back to it later when Jason joins in the second hour. We talked a lot yesterday about the Michael Jordan documentary. Episode 7 and 8 took place on Sunday. Only 2 episodes left all of a sudden in The Last Dance. This documentary has been wildly entertaining, gripping. It's kept my attention from start to finish now. Every Sunday night I'm tuned in for 2 hours. And this past week, we talked about pretty much everything we wanted to hit on yesterday, but there was one thing we actually didn't talk about that I think is pretty fascinating. We all saw Scottie Pippen when Phil Jackson said, you know what, Tony Kukoc is going to take this final shot. He draws up the play and gives it to Tony. And what does Scottie do? He says, hey, I'm just not going to come back in the game. And he sits on the bench. And what is Phil's reaction? Phil says, F him, forget about him. We'll play without him. Tony Kukoc ends up winning the game on a last-second shot. The emotions spill over in the locker room afterwards. Scottie apologizes. But what was really interesting and shocking was when they asked Scottie Pippen about that situation. He said, here he is 25 years later. He said, if I could go back, would I change it? No. His answer was still no. He would do it all again. I would think that by this time, looking back on something like that, the answer might be, yeah. You know, I wouldn't have quit on my team. I wasn't happy about it, and I wouldn't be happy about it again. But I would accept that role, and if it's what Phil thought was best, then that's what's best. That would have been what I thought Scottie would say. Now, for diehard Bulls fans, I have to think that's a punch in the gut right there. 25 years later, and it's the same answer. He had all this time to think about it. Ouch. Nope, still wouldn't. Still would quit on my team. I don't know about you guys, but that just doesn't come off as Scottie Pippen-ish to me. I mean, they talked about it. Said, hey, when MJ went and played baseball that season, we all had that sigh of relief for a while because it was Scottie's team now, and it wasn't as aggressive. There wasn't all this yelling and shouting up in your face. It was Scottie playing with the team. We all knew who he was and who his position was and on the team and where he ran things, where we stood, and we worked with it. We gelled. And that kind of seems like the Scottie that everybody understands from the outside looking in. And you even get Dennis Rodman coming out last week, and he defends Scottie through this whole thing and says, you know what, Scottie was too quiet during all this. Didn't speak up a lot. He knew Michael was the king, and he was right next to him. But he was behind him. So it's interesting to see that perspective from Scottie Pippen. He knew how good he was. And really, seeing highlights and watching more Scottie Pippen tape, I think people are getting more of that impression and understanding of truly, he probably was the second best player in the league during that time. Behind, the other guy on his team. They don't make that body type anymore with that position and the ability to handle the ball like that. Scottie could do it all. Played above the rim, but he could out-dribble you. He could get past you. He could pass. All of those skill sets combined into one lanky guy who got it done behind the scenes. But he knew how good he was, and I think it kind of overflowed and it spilled over just a little bit there when Phil said, you know what, Tony's going to get the shot. Now, if Michael Jordan had left, I'm getting all my MJs mixed up here. If Michael Jordan had left and gone and played baseball, and Scottie Pippen immediately assumed the role of, I'm going to be MJ now, and that includes me getting in your face, telling you what's up, you're going to do things my way. Would that have changed that situation with Phil Jackson? Would he have been like, you know what? Scottie asserted himself early on. He's my guy right now. I got to get him the ball. Maybe, in a way, the more quietness and the more laid-back attitude of Scottie Pippen resulted in him not getting a chance on the last shot. But Phil Jackson thought Tony Kukoc had the shot to get it done. He's done it before, and he did it again. But Phil Jackson looked like a genius. If Tony had missed that shot, we would have heard talk forever and ever and ever. And why in the world would you not put Scottie Pippen in? He's sitting on your bench, for crying out loud. But I thought it was really shocking to hear Scottie say that all these years later. Nah, I'd do it again. Wow. I try to put myself in that perspective of a diehard fan of a team, thinking about a player that might have a chance to say, you know what, I messed up and I'll regret that forever. No, they do it again. And I've heard from people that know Bulls fans or are Bulls fans, what have you, bring up Scottie Pippen, and they say, pretty quickly, remember that one time he quit on the team? And it even said in the documentary, that's going to stain his reputation forever, and it did. I think some people look at Scottie a little bit different for now. Weren't people all about kind of feeling bad for Scottie Pippen because he was in the shadow of Michael Jordan all these years, but at times seemed just as good of a player? Had he been on a different team all his career, would he have been touted as one of the better players in the league? I would think so. So it's really something you don't expect from the way Scottie brings himself about. And I was a little shocked when I heard that. Something we didn't talk about yesterday. But I'll tell you what, watching The Last Dance all these weeks, there hasn't been one time after an episode where I've gone, man, that was boring. Man, there was no really, turn surprises in that one. Every single week, it keeps you in tune. It's something you look forward to. And ESPN hit it out of the park by moving this up during this time and giving people sports when we need it most. I applaud them on that. I applaud the filmmaking. I applaud the ability to put together a docuseries as well as this one, because I know a ton of work went into it and it's paying off. This thing's going to win a ton of awards before it's all said and done. You watch and see. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the NBA. They were sent a poll out today to players about whether they wanted to play again this season. Should they even have a season anymore? I'll tell you why they should or shouldn't next here on the Afternoon Sports Track.
We cowboy up every day. We are the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
If you
levitating off the blacktop. Used to struggle getting started, now I can't stop. Used to be the quiet kid in the sandbox, now it's hands up every time that your man rocks. They ought to stop me coming in again. You mad? You thought we were synonyms? Too bad, that's the water you're getting in. You're too fat for the sharks that you're swimming in.
Woo. Mike Shinoda makes me want to run through a wall.
Like fruit spinning around in the blender. Hardly a snack when I'm here looking for dinner. I eat them, delete them, they're barely beginners.
Kills it every time. He's the guy. You may recognize that voice. You say, where's Mike Shinoda? I know I've heard of that before. Yeah, Linkin Park. Co-founder of Linkin Park. Obviously, we all know what happened with them. Rest in peace to Chester Bennington. It was one of the best bands of all time. Mike went on and released that album afterwards. Man, it was good. Raw, emotional, loved every bit of it. Gets me hype. You know what else gets me hype on this Tuesday? The announcement that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, the video game, is coming back. Remastered. Coming back September 4th, 2020. I can't wait. Grew up on that video game. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2. Hell yeah. I am pumped for that. Nothing like remastering one of the classic video games of all time. Be like, video games? Come on, man. What are you talking about? No. I know a lot of people over this time that have discovered video games because there's not a lot more for them to do. And they found a new hobby. I recommend it. I recommend trying it out. See what you think. Maybe try out with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. That's awesome. I saw that news. I can't wait. Nostalgic. Big time when I saw that. The NBA. So many talks about, should the NBA return? Will it return? Yes, no, maybe. The NBA players today were polled on a strict yes or no. That's what they wanted the answers to be. The MLB or the NBA PA sent it out and said, we want a yes or no answer. Do you want to play again this season? I'm going to be fascinated by the results of this poll. Because there's reasons behind wanting to play again, right? If you're on a playoff team, of course, you'd love to finish out the season and head into the playoffs and get it done, right? Chase a ring. But if you're one of those teams, Warriors, who's sitting at 15 and 50, then if you're being honest, right, you answer no. And I said this last time we talked about the NBA, because the Warriors front office comes out and says, hey, we may be in this really bad position and we may have a terrible record, but our players want to get back just for the sake of and the love of the NBA. BS! I need a BS flag because I'm about to throw it. Draymond Green and Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, they don't care about the NBA. If they're not in a position to win and succeed in the playoffs, they don't want to come back. Would you? What would be your reasoning other than to just continue and play and hone your skills a little bit? What would be the reasoning, really? There is none. Not any that makes sense. Maybe say, well, it's been such a long time since we played. I'd love to get back. But other than that, come on. So it'll be interesting to see, yes or no, what players say on this poll. Now, here's what I loved. Adam Silver's response to the latest questions about the coronavirus in the NBA. One of the questions was, what happens if a player tests positive? And what does he respond with? Paraphrasing here, of course, but he says, we don't shut down the league. We hope to have daily testing by then. We quarantine that player and keep playing. That's what the UFC did. And it worked. The UFC had a great weekend. And they had someone test positive. It'd be the same thing for the NBA. Especially if we keep moving forward and this testing is even more available than it is now. When that becomes the case, then as the NBA, you have to throw in that idea of let's just go ahead and jump into the postseason and go from there. We have enough testing. If someone tests positive, that player is quarantined for 14 days and we keep moving on. You don't shut everything down. It would make no sense to shut everything down. Then you get the Players Union chief, Michelle Roberts. She comes out and says there's still concerns. There's still this huge risk. Would it be worth it? People having freedom to come and go here would carry risks. If testing is available, what's the risk? And if that's the mindset, and all these players, again, are also like the MLB, and they're worried about a possible quarantine bubble, which was what was talked about with Roberts, then scrap the season. If that's going to be the case, just scrap it. Why should we have it anymore? That's what I said about Major League Baseball. If it's true that everyone's mindset is they're scared, and there's this huge risk factor involved, then why even talk about having the season anymore? The more and more talk about a quarantine bubble, for instance, in the NBA, the more it makes sense to me. How else are you going to do it? The idea to put them at Disney World makes sense. The courts are playable. They're accessible for broadcasts. You can do multiple games a day. No one can come into the Disney World area. It's just the players and the staff. There's no risk at that point. Adam Silver comes in and tells the players, hey, I like the idea of Disney World and Vegas. You get those two bubble cities, you throw them in there, and you finish the season. They had 2 weeks left remaining in the regular season. He wants every series to continue to be 7 games, still thinks that's possible, and also still says that a decision doesn't have to be made about this season until June. So here we go. NBA fans moving 1 month later again here. If you're a big fan of the NBA, don't get too hyped yet because you've still got some time. When I see that, I'm like, you know what? How big of a hurry are these guys really in? The NBA, and when I see stuff like that, it makes me think even more, they're just not going to do it. At this point, you pull the plug. If the idea is we can't have this in 2 quarantine cities, we can't have this in 2 quarantine bubbles, how else are you going to do the NBA? If there's all this concern still out there, tell me how else you're going to get it done. So if you can't decide between going to Disney World in Las Vegas, getting the rest of the season in, or just not doing it at all, and you sit there and ponder for another month, just don't have it. Just scrap it. How many people are going to be extremely sad that they end the NBA season anyways? Almost all eyes on the NBA come during the playoffs, right? Ratings have been down for some time now. But to me, this doesn't help things. If the NBA wanted to make things right and wanted to get viewers back, They would come up with an idea, and they would do it fairly soon. And when I say an idea, I mean one that actually sticks. One that actually lands and has traction. Because it's possible, and Adam Silver knows it's possible. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said what he said about a player testing positive for the coronavirus. Him saying that right there tells me that he knows this can be done. And it can be done even if they have issues. It can still be completed. So, I'm pretty much done waiting around for the NBA, and I'm not getting too excited with all these new reports. We're going to have a season, we're not, because nothing's changed. Nothing has changed. I never bought Chris Paul's comments either that you need a long time to prepare to get back to the NBA. No, you don't. You do 3 weeks max of practice and conditioning, and you're ready to go. Hopefully some of these players have still been doing as much as they can over the break in hopes that they return. But I don't buy you need a ton of time to get back into the NBA style of play, NBA shape. And here's the other thing. Why in the world do we have to have this idea that the NBA needs to be the team, needs to be the league, I should say, to bring everything back? I think that they as a league almost feel a sense of maybe guilt, right? Because Rudy Gobert tests positive and sports ultimately shuts down as we know it as a whole. And I think a lot of them believe, and Adam Silver might truly believe, that they need to be the league to start it back up because they effectively shut it down. I don't believe that has to be the case. If it comes down to it, and you got to scrap the season, then fine. But quit jerking everybody around and leading us on. Because I feel like that's what it is now. If they don't jump on the idea of hopping into Disney World in Las Vegas, then there's really no point in talking about it anymore. Bottom line, I don't see the NBA coming back and getting the poll results from these players. And if the majority say no, that might just be the cherry on top. And to wrap this up, the NFL has cornered the NBA, and the NBA knows it. The NFL is breathing down the neck and is about to stomp on it. They've taken over and done so even more effectively this year. Amidst all of this, they had timing on their side with this pandemic, and they took full advantage. And they are kicking butt in the sports world, especially against the NBA. NFL rules the roost. The NBA knows it. So if they scrap this season, will anybody really be surprised at this point? I don't think so. Hour number 2 is rolling in just a minute. We'll talk about the NFL. We'll talk about Major League Soccer. The MLS has proposed an idea of how to come back as well. That's the best part about all this. We're getting closer and closer because these leagues are throwing out these ideas. Hey, we can do this. Let's get it done. That's where we're at now. We'll also talk about the UFC. I think they had a very successful weekend, and I'll prove that to you. All that's next. You're locked in here to the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
But if you had this life, you'd understand. Everything's a lot of up and down. But I ain't gonna let it get me down. Nah.
Hour number 2 of the Afternoon Sports Drive. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Patrick Wheeler with you. Triple Play Sports Radio Network. 105.1, 93.1 here in Stillwater, and the Triple Play Sports Radio app. Wherever you may be listening, you can hear us on there. We are live 8 to 5 every day. Actually, 7 to 5. Steve's Daniels show starts at 7. Get him for 3 hours with the morning scramble. Robert's show from 10 to 1. TV 31 at 1 from 1 to 3. And then you get us here at the end of your day, 3 to 5. And that's where we are now, hour number 2. Hope everybody's enjoyed the show so far. Thanks for hanging out. Got questions, got comments, call in 533-1051, 533-1020. I'm sure I can help you out with whatever's going on. In the sports world, we are still chugging along, getting all these major sports talking about ideas about coming back. Of course, the questions remain still with college football, all that. We've discussed that in the first hour. College football is going to happen. Baseball is going to happen. NFL is going to happen. Now, Major League NBA, I should say, up in the air. Let's look at the NFL a little bit here. I said it too to end the first hour, but they have run the table for a while now in sports. I think they did an amazing job over this offseason. Of course, we all knew going in, right, before coronavirus and everything happened, this was going to be one crazy offseason. Free agency was going to be off the charts. Players were going to go everywhere. And I forgot the day of it now off the top of my head, but when it all started, I remember sitting there. I wasn't here yet in Stillwater. Sitting there doing one of my Periscope shows. I look down, and I can't stop getting notifications about players going different spots. All the talk had been about where's Tom Brady going to go? Where's Phillip Rivers going to go? Where are all these receivers going to end up? And it was wild. Really the whole offseason, but those few days to start free agency were about as crazy. I think they're probably about as crazy as we've ever seen in the NFL and as we might ever see. Namely because you had a guy that defined what it meant to stay with one team for what looked like an entire career, ultimately go somewhere else. Tom Brady heads south and ends up with Tampa Bay. So they start there by doing a great job. Obviously, free agency was extremely entertaining. And then when it carried over, it gave us stuff to talk about. Almost made us feel normal again. All the sports junkies. That, hey, look, the NFL they're not quite obviously back yet, but hey, this is a start. We're moving forward. And then they just kept the foot on the gas from there. The draft was well done. I can't really give enough praise to the NFL for how efficiently the draft was put on. In a situation where lots of mistakes could have happened, where the production quality could have decreased, I don't think any of that happened. I think it was very well done, very well put on, and my hat goes off to all the production involved in a very unprecedented way. Even Roger Goodell, I got to give him credit. That doesn't happen very often, but I will. He did great. He did really great. They're killing it. The NFL is lining up all these sports, and they are killing it. The NBA, they were it, right? For a long time, they ran the table. Not anymore. They own the sports world. The NFL does. And again, I have to reiterate this point. The timing couldn't have been better for the NFL. The coronavirus pandemic shuts down everything basically right after the Super Bowl. The NFL got the Super Bowl in. And if you remember us talking about that story that came out from the doctor in California saying they had set up that coronavirus headquarters around the Bay Area and already had a couple of patients there on the night of the Super Bowl. So the Super Bowl gets in before all this blows up, and the NFL has all this time to prepare. They get to see what other sports leagues do. And here's the thing. Roger Goodell and the NFL, they could have folded. They could have cowered under everything that happened, and would anybody have blamed them had they come out and said, you know what, we can't do a draft. Or we don't know if we're going to have a season. No, a lot of people would have been like, well, man, at this time, I guess that's a little understandable. But they didn't. Roger Goodell did not back down from any of this. The NFL did not back down from any of this. They kept things running. They stayed on time. Goodell said, you know what? Not only are we going to have the NFL draft, it's going to happen as scheduled. And it did. And it was great. And had a record number of viewers. People are loving that the direction the NFL is taking. Why? Because they care about one thing, and that's being entertaining. And they always have. They have the best athletes in the world. All in one league, the biggest names, and they run with it. They do a great job of it. Dr. Anthony Fauci comes out and says about the NFL, he thinks there's too much infection, obviously, for a season right now. Again, going back to timing, but hopes by September it won't be the way that it is now, which, based on models and data right now, looks like that's going to be the case. He even went as far to say it's feasible to assume that a third or even half a stadium could fill up by the time the NFL season starts if fans aren't as much of a risk anymore. And I think we're going to see that. We're getting these antibody tests. A lot of this is showing. For instance, in Ohio, results came back today that they had cases in Ohio dating back to January. They had 5 different cases in 5 different counties in the state of Ohio back in January. Coronavirus has been around long before we knew about it. So we get these antibody tests and we get more data. And you have to think, by the time the NFL slated to start September 10th, they pretty much hit it. They pretty much got the luck of the draw here. And they're going to go with it, and they're going to take it in full stride, and may be the only sport that can say, hey, we got this done with a full season, hardly any restrictions, and oh, by the way, we're still killing it in the sports world. Because they are. They absolutely are. The draft, not only was it well done, but it brought up so many different storylines. It made people feel like, you know what? Maybe we are a little bit closer than we thought originally to getting sports back. Then on top of it, all of the fundraisers that were done, all those funds raised by the draft to go towards COVID-19 relief. How big of a win was that? All that could not have been done better, in my opinion. And I'm not the guy that's ever going to go out of his way to usually say good things about the NFL commissioner, but my goodness, he's done about as good a job as anyone could have in this situation by standing their ground and remaining the sports king. I mean, really, does anybody think that the NFL doesn't run it? Because if you do, you're wrong. Plain and simple. They do. And they do a great job. I didn't even talk about the schedule release. That was a big deal. They added that to the pile. Schedule release happened the other day and last weekend, and a lot of talk about those matchups early on. Week 1 is loaded up. Obviously, the first game of the year is going to draw a ton of eyes. Chiefs-Texans, September 10th. People are interested in the Chiefs. Even the non-Chiefs fan is going to say, you know what, that offense, they're still fun to watch. Patrick Mahomes doesn't come around very often. There's going to be a lot of eyes on that game. Especially if fans can be there too. Because I don't know about you guys, but watching sports, I like to say that maybe no fans won't be a huge deal. But the viewing experience to me, even from my television set, has a lot to do with the roar of a crowd. It makes you feel that sense of just how enormous a certain play or a certain change in the games can be. Especially with crowds like at Arrowhead Stadium, where you don't find them like that anywhere in the world. It's a big deal. I think the NFL has hit the nail on the head over and over and over. And the NBA knows it. That's what I said last hour. The NBA has to feel the pressure right now. Would that ultimately drive Adam Silver to want to try to get this thing back at whatever it takes to get the season started up again? I would think a little bit. And that's why he made those statements. I'm really intrigued to see what that poll for the NBA players ultimately says. Do you want to play again this season? Yes or no? Bottom line, yes or no? I think some people might be shocked. The UFC returned this weekend. It was really the first official sporting event. Sports coming back was really led by UFC. This weekend, they had a very successful viewership. Over 700,000 buys on the UFC pay-per-view. 700,000. That's not bad at all. I got to give credit to Dana White, UFC president from the start of all of this. He was all in on keeping fighting going. Remember the talks? He said, I'm going to buy a private island, and we're going to have fights on that island because the UFC is not backing down from this thing. And then again, you get a guy that tests positive. One of the fighters tests positive for the coronavirus this weekend. Did the UFC run and panic and shut the whole thing down? No! They followed the guidelines, they quarantined the guy, they canceled his fight, and they moved on with the rest of the fights and kept it going. It was a huge success. With ratings and on the betting side as well. People finally got to bet on sports again. How great is that? It's been a while since that has taken place. So I got to give credit to the UFC and Dana White. Because at this time, and with what happened with the player testing positive, they could have very easily just folded up and called it right there. And think about if that had happened. Where would the discussion today be with when sports are going to return? If the UFC had folded up and canceled everything after that one guy tested positive, what would we be talking about right now? What would everybody be talking about? They'd be saying, look, see? Those guys that pointed out earlier and said, that's why we can't have sports back. Right there. And they'd be feeling really good about themselves. A lot of writers in the media have talked about, we can't have sports because guys are going to test positive. They have to be feeling pretty small right now. Got to be feeling pretty dumb right about now. When you get an athlete testing positive and all hell doesn't break loose. Like a lot of people want to happen. Because they do. It's just the truth. Since all of this has taken place, we've had plenty of prominent names in the media and sports media rooting for failure. And I have to think that when the news came out, because it was news, it broke pretty quickly and it was big news. That fighter had tested positive for the coronavirus. And you just know some of those writers were licking their lips. Ooh, that's exactly what we were talking about. Look how right I look. And then what does Dana White do? He says, yep, test positive, fight's canceled, he's quarantined, let's go, we're still fighting. Hats off. Very well done. Very well done. When we come back, Zion Williamson. Uh-oh. He's in a little bit of trouble. I'll tell you what that's all about next year on the Afternoon Sports Drive.
She like my futuristic sounds in the new spaceship. Futuristic if it's Philip Cake. She never need a man, she what a man need. So I keep on falling for her daily. We was at Coachella going crazy. Stack a couple M's like I was shady. Now I'm in Tribeca like I'm Jay-Z. Rockin' Sorayama like he pay me. I just signed a new deal with Mercedes. Got me moving dirty like I'm Swayze. All my diamonds dancing like they Swayze.
Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler with you.
That's so big, got a business center.
Hope everybody's having a great Tuesday. Wrapping it up here for you. You're in the right spot. Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
Cali was the mission, but now it's leaving.
Lots of ways to listen. 105.1, 93.1 here in Stillwater, and of course the Triple Play Sports Radio app. Anywhere in the world. Download that app for free, even if you're in Stillwater. You find yourself out of town at 3 o'clock someday and you say, man, I wish I was listening to the Afternoon Sports Drive. I can't quite pick it up wherever I am. Oh, wait, yeah, I can. I've got that app and it does everything. It's free, and you know what? It literally starts playing the second you open it. How cool is that? I say get it if you haven't, and I'm not biased. I'm also curious, what has been a few things that you have realized you've taken advantage of that you couldn't do during the coronavirus? 3 things come to mind for me. 1, I will never take for granted my barber ever again. Getting a haircut was something I missed just about as much as anything during all of this. Tip your barbers. You never know when you're going to need them the most. The other one, the gym. I was in a seriously good routine. 3-4 times a week, lifting, everything was great. And then bam, out of nowhere. Nothing worse than getting taken out of your workout routine. I can't really do any more at-home workouts. I'm about sick of push-ups, not going to lie. I have this older dresser in my apartment. Doesn't weigh a ton, but I figured out if you do the right lift with it, you can get some work out of it. That's where I am. I need gyms to open back up. I miss gyms. And then the third thing, for me, I never realized just how much I really enjoyed sports betting. Sports betting is fun. It's entertaining. And with no sports to bet on, this has been rough. The draft was finally something you could jump on. UFC, I guess now. And speaking of, odds were released for the Big 12 championship. Who's going to win it all in football this season? Where did Oklahoma State land? They had the third best chance, according to a sports book that I read, in the Big 12 to win, sitting at a 6-1 odds right now, only behind Texas and OU, which probably doesn't really surprise a lot of people. But here's the cool part. Oklahoma State has received some serious buzz already about being one of those dark horses in the Big 12. I saw a list today. I think it was CBS Sports. Talked about college football teams to watch out for that deserve some off-season buzz. And Oklahoma State made the list. And I think rightfully so. If Spencer Sanders, Chuba Hubbard, Tylan Wallace can all stay healthy, that's a pretty good 1-2-3 punch right there. Of course, you can add in as many other players as you want there, and you can name off coaches and everything else. But hey, I'll tell you what, quarterback, check. Running back, check. Wide receiver, check. Also, odds were released for the 2020 Heisman Trophy winner. Chuba Hubbard sitting at plus 2,200 right now as well. In case anyone was wondering, he finished 8th last year in the Heisman voting. There's going to be some money put on Chuba Hubbard. Let's go to the phone lines. You're on the Afternoon Sports Drive. Go ahead.
Hi, yes. A little bit ago you were asking kind of what we've been taking for granted here recently. And I tell you what, I miss sports every day. And if it wasn't for your radio show, I don't think I could have made it this long. I just really wanted to call in and send out my appreciation to your show and just tell you thank you for being a essential worker during this time. You've really blessed our hearts and our ears these last few weeks. So thank you for all you've done.
Hey, I appreciate that. Thanks for the kind words.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And let me ask you this. What is your opinion on what time this disease will start to kind of die down so sports can come back? I really would. I enjoy listening to your show, but I really enjoy my sports, and I really miss seeing them. So do you know kind of a timeline, or have you heard anything? I know you probably have more information than what us normal people receive.
You know, I've said it before, and I'll still say it again. I think sports could happen right now. I think they could take place right now. And if anything, at least training for these sports could start right now, because we're seeing that data continue to come out that young, healthy adults aren't as affected by the coronavirus. With that being the case, with that being the case, we could make an argument that athletes are about as healthy as anybody, if not more so, right? So they could come back, get started. And I would think, and I've said it before too, before all this happened, that this summer, when I talk about this summer, I mean June, July, August, is going to be, I believe, the most sports-filled summer we've ever seen.
You know, that's actually a very good point. I actually am looking forward to that.
Well, hey, I appreciate the call.
Yes, thank you so much. And once again, thank you for all you've done for us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Wow, nice words. Really appreciate that. You know what? It's just like, that's the question, right? That everybody's asking is, when are sports going to come back, man? I feel like that's been the hottest question, right? About this whole time. Even people that aren't sports fans, I've had talk to me. When do you think sports are going to come back? That's my best answer right now, is that I really think this summer could be the greatest sports summer of all time. With Major League Baseball possibly launching in July, with the NBA possibly returning. That's pretty tentative. But you talk about the NHL may be coming back. Major League Soccer could be coming back. We know the golf tournaments that are going to happen. I mean, you throw all of that in there, and I think we have the potential for a pretty amazing sports summer. Not to mention college football right after it, and then the NFL. It could lead us back into more of a normal sports life. That's where everybody wants to be. And we're going to get there. These days have felt like the longest days of all time. And I think that's what people maybe even miss the most about sports. I've said this before, but sports were that outlet, right, for a lot of people. Well, you could have one crappy day. Nothing goes your way. Everything seems to be going against you. But then what happens at the end of the day? You go home, you crack open a cold one, and you watch the game, right? An unbiased game. Nobody's sitting there telling you what to do. You're just relaxing for 3 hours, watching fair competition. That's what we miss about sports. It was that escape for a lot of people. I know it was for a lot of people that I've talked to, and they say, you know what I miss the most? Just being able to forget about everything for a few hours. And to me, it was even the same way when you could go to sports events in person too. Nothing's more exciting than going to a Major League Baseball game or a football game on Sunday or Saturday in college. I mean, all of that is, for those 3 or 4 hours, it's just different. It's not the mundane, everyday, same thing, right? It's an escape from that. It's different. And every time is unique. You never know what's going to happen. Maybe you witness a record being broken. Maybe you see a no-hitter thrown. I mean, all of that opportunity and excitement was a part of every single matchup. That's what people miss. It goes so much deeper than just a game being played. I think everybody can get on board with that. If anything, let's get sports to come back for those reasons. And then we'll throw everything else out there. Because on any normal day, right? I'd be wrapping up the show, head home, and a couple hours the Cardinals come on, and life's great. Life's great anyways, but come on. You add sports and it just keeps getting better. That's what everybody loved. That's what everybody misses. If we could get that back today, there would be jumps for joy from every corner of this country. And we're going to get there. Again, we're going to get there. When we looked at the idea of Major League Soccer returning, I like what they said in, you know what? We're going to take what the Major League Baseball people have said. We're going to take what the NBA people have said. Maybe even the NFL at some scope. But we're going to think of our own here and kind of mix it together at the same time and say, why not take everybody to Orlando, finish the season at where else but the worldwide sports complex in Disney World. That's what the NBA talked about too. It's not a coincidence that this idea is being brought up again here in a different sports league. MLS understands it as well. They see a spot. And that's what it draws the attention and the eyes of so many people in major sports, is because you have to think about, I don't know how many people have actually been to the worldwide sports complexes in Orlando, Florida. It's sealed off, 200 plus acres, private land. That seems like the perfect spot to launch stuff, to launch sports back. Does it not? It's virtually a bubble in its own self. You might even be able to ease some restrictions than compared to what if you had it in Arizona or Florida in a city. This is just 200 plus acres of land, private land. Why not go out there? And especially in this sense, Major League Soccer, they say we can play multiple matches a day. ESPN, oh, by the way, is a big part of it as well, and they could air all our matches. Too many pieces make sense for leagues not to take advantage and at least try to pull the trigger on this worldwide sports complex thing. Let's go back to the phone lines. You're on the Afternoon Sports Drive.
Yeah, I can't wait till Sunday when the Cowboys take on McElroy and Johnson.
That's right.
And because that's not that many days away, but you wonder what market share they're going to have for that, because they should be charging a fortune for ads for that, because everybody's going to watch that just like the NFL draft.